David, take it away.
Well, good morning. Thanks for hanging around after all the festivities. So actually, I wanted to start by telling you that before I ever started wood turning, I made furniture and other flat work for years and years as a hobby. All kinds of furniture, all kinds of flat work. And to the best of my recollection, filled a couple of houses with furniture that I had made. I don't believe I ever added color to anything. I mean, it had to be wood, just wood, finished. And anything else was like, that, why would anybody do that? Now, skipping ahead, maybe 12, 15 years ago, when I first started turning and joined this club, the Christmas party, I told Merrill Salem this story earlier, it's actually a Merrill story. She was one of the judges in the awards for pieces at the Christmas party. And she held up, it wasn't my piece, but a piece that somebody had made, and was looking at it and commented on it. It was a nice piece and it was well done. And then she said, it would have been so much nicer if it had been painted. And I was completely horrified. Paint on wood? I was like, who does that? Well, times change. So I started thinking about all the different ways wood turners add color to their turnings. By the way, in this room right now, how many of you have never added color to a turning? I'd say maybe half, somewhere around that. Good. So you are basically where I was some years ago, and then I started getting interested. When I started thinking about all the different ways that wood turners add color, it's actually a pretty long list. You've got paint, you've got dye, you've got tinted epoxy, something with which I have a fair amount of experience with. You've got colored pencils on things like basket illusion work, which we just saw a beautiful example of. And one we don't normally think of is those who do segmented work and use different varieties of wood, which I call painting with wood, using different varieties and colors of wood for design and whatnot. So many of us have used wood a lot. Now I'm going to demonstrate two different things. There's an almost infinite variety of things you can do, but these are opposite ends of the spectrum, a paint and a dye. And I'll just spend a minute or two talking about what's the difference between them. In a paint, you are totally covering the surface. You're putting a barrier on the surface, and you don't see what's underneath at all. So you are completely obscuring the grain and everything else. In dye, the opposite end of the spectrum, it's transparent or at least translucent, and so grain, pattern come through. And so I'm going to demonstrate one technique from each side of this using different products. And by the way, on the whiteboard is a list of all the various products, paints, and stuff that I'm using today. So if anybody's interested, they can just take a picture of that, and it's up there. Now, some might ask, what about stain? Stain is sort of halfway in between paint and dye. What I should have said about paint, by the way, to start with, is the coloring or material that adds opacity to it is suspended in the material. Little particles, if you will, of pigment, or titanium dioxide if it's white. In dye, the colored material is dissolved. And so these dyes I'm going to show today, as many of them, happen to be an alcohol base, where they are dissolved. In other words, they started as a very fine powder, they're mixed very carefully, not by me, but by the supplier. And the difference is, with the paint, it's sitting on top. With the dye, it sinks in to the wood, permeates the wood pores, and that's what you're seeing. What you choose and when you choose it, anybody's choice. What you see in front of you, on sort of directly in front of me, those pieces are all using dye. The ones on my left are using, are using paint. The ones on my left are using dye. And so we're going to start with, and why would we do this? Well, here's a blank. A rather ugly piece of poplar. I don't like poplar at all. I hate this yellowish green tint that it usually has. It doesn't turn terribly well. It tends to be stringy rather than cut crisply and cleanly. And if you had this blank, or if I had this blank and I wasn't into coloring, I'd probably burn it. I wouldn't think of turning this into something useful. Well, we're going to try and do that here. But whether you use paint or dye, surface preparation is absolutely crucial. Because if you think you're going to hide any defects, it's quite the opposite. Whether paint or dye, any surface defect telegraphs right through it and makes it look 5 times worse than it would on natural wood. So surface preparation is key. Now, I normally do these with mortises, and I normally do them with a mortise on each end, just because it's a lot easier to be able to go back and forth. So this one I've just roughly shaped out a bowl. And I have sanded this to 220. Okay, that's turning true. Now, just to demonstrate what I do, I use Abranet, big fan, and I'll put some, well, actually before I do that, I am going to raise the grain by putting a little alcohol on this. Now you could do this with water. The advantage of alcohol is it dries faster. So for our purposes here today, that's certainly helpful. Turn it on, let it dry out.
That's denatured alcohol?
Yes.
Well,
You think I'd be putting drinking alcohol on it?
we were talking about bowls and cups a little while ago.
So it's a little fuzzy. It's not quite dry yet. We'll let it dry just a bit more. So I can feel a little bit of fuzziness, which I did not feel before. So now I'm going to take a piece of, this happens to be 320. This will work. I promise not to do much sanding. And that has pretty much gotten rid of all that grain. Now it's smooth. Not good enough though. And I'm a fan of Yorkshire grit. Now, Craft Supply sells one also called, I think, AAA, and others do it. This is a wax paste with abrasive in it that breaks down. And rather than take this all the way up to 800 or 1,000 grit, I have found that with this stuff, I get a very fine finish. Rub it on, like so. Polish it in. First at slow speed, like this. Then I'm going to take a clean piece of towel. By the way, I love these blue towels. Costco sells bundles of, I don't know, 12 or 16 rolls of this at a very reasonable price. The goal here, you can see a little wax on that towel. The goal here is to keep doing it until you don't. And you've got it all off. And it feels pretty good to me. I'm going to turn the speed down, way down. There we go. All right, next step.
If you were to equate that to say Abernat, what grit would you think you were getting to?
600-800. And where this crack is, it's a little hard for me to tell because I'm feeling the crack rather than that. But what we're going to do now, the next step in this process, is we're going to paint this thing black. So we got our surface where we want it. And I turn this in a routine way and use some shear scraping and then sand, get the shape you want, and then get it down to basically where you say, okay, I'd finish this now. I'd put finish on it. Because that's where it has to be. I think I've got everything pretty well protected here.
David, the residual wax doesn't interfere with the paint?
No, never has. And then we have the most important step, which is shaking the hell out of this. This one works pretty well. When I'm using the spray clear lacquer, I actually watch a second hand on the clock to force myself, to shake this thing for a minute or two, because it seems like time goes on forever. So it takes 2 coats, and the trick is not to put too much on.
You have a particular brand or type of black paint?
It's on that thing.
Oh, okay.
This thing turns slower than my lathe at home, so that's really nice. Always when you paint, when you're done with that coat, which I now am, turn the thing over, hit it lightly, and clear the nozzle. You want it to work the next time. So we'll just let this turn. While it's turning, it's sort of like a cooking show where, they mix up something and they say, put this in the oven for 50 minutes at 400 degrees. Oh, and here's one we already did. Yeah. Okay, we're going to use this to put color on. So I'm gonna do some things to force drying here, just the exigencies of the situation. This stuff dries pretty darn quickly. I don't know if you can see it, you can still see grain through this thing. So we'll let this go. While that's going, let me talk to you about the importance of making samples. I think I'm going to step down. Now, when you're using this paint technique, it's not as important because you are completely obliterating the substrate. You know, you're working on a black canvas is essentially what you're doing. Would you like me to face this way? And so I make lots of these little boards. Whoa!
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Here's the other one.
I should have had you do that, Joe.
So I'll take a piece of wood, sand it lightly with 220 just by hand. I'll write on the back what it is, what colors I used, and how I applied them. And I keep this and go back and refer to them. So I'll know, oh, well, what if I mix violet and gold? You know, what do I end up with? Or checking different brush strokes. Now here's one, same paint, 2 different brush strokes. So with this translucent paint that we're going to be putting on top of the black, how you apply it has quite an impact. And I'm going to show you a little bit of that. Or if you want to do any surface carving, it's a good time to play with that. So here is one where the black is not this painted black, it's India ink, which I also use fairly often. Not for this paint, but for the dye, as a substrate under the dye. And the India ink's easy to apply and is really quite black. It's permanent also. And if you want to play with carving and see what that's going to look like, that's your time to do it. Because ultimately you may want to make a piece like this, just for the heck of it. Tried to make this one to look like the sea, something like water. Incorporating carving as well as color. But these things are absolutely critical. And I'm going to show you just how critical.
David, do you want your test strip to be the same kind of wood, or does it matter once it's black?
You need to move back to your position.
For this painting one, it does not matter. For the dye one, it matters a lot. I'm about to show that. So now here are 2 sample pieces.
Nice.
One is maple, the other is, what the heck was this? Dark wood. Identical paint, applied the identical stain, or dye, I should say, applied the identical way. And look at the difference. You wouldn't know they were the same. And that's why, one, you have to do this to get some idea of what it's going to look like. And 2, if you don't, this is cedar. I had some left over from a fence. And because if you don't like it on your actual piece, you're going to end up cutting it off and reapplying it. Here's another example. Same exact test. Maple, cedar, exact same dye applied exactly the same way. And look at the difference. So the substrate, when you're doing anything that's transparent, matters enormously. When your substrate is black, it doesn't matter. In fact, let's put a little more black on this thing. All right, so while that's drying, so that bowl is ready, or when it's dry, it'll be ready. And with this stuff, with this lacquer, once it's dry, you can go ahead to the next step. And that shouldn't take more than 10, 15 minutes with this stuff.
So when you turn it around after you've painted it, right, and you're hollowing out the bowl part, you come back to the mortise in the bottom
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
paint that again, or
yeah, I do.
you probably damage it with your jaws, right?
Well, often I'll wrap some soft, like electrician's tape around the end of my jaws so that they don't mar that inside thing. But the reason I don't use tenons on the bottom is otherwise, then you have to remove the tenon, and on a painted or dyed piece, you know, you're gonna be left with bare wood. It's almost impossible to then go back and patch it, so you can leave it bare. So, for example, like this one, but I prefer this, right? Where is the lock on this thing?
Lock.
So I can remove this.
On the back side, there's a knob, on the back of the headstock, there's a knob that just slides up.
In front of you.
Slides up. Oh, this thing?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, there we go. Well, either it's not working or I'm not working.
Show his head.
Or you don't think there's some screw in it.
Oh, it is, okay. We'll just set this aside. I can paint on the lathe, or maybe it's a little easier to see if I do it here, just on a Lazy Susan. Oh, you know what I forgot to bring? It's just a couple of wood blocks to put under this, a couple of scrap pieces. Anybody got anything? Long rod.
How long?
Yeah, 2 of those would be fine. Yeah, I got it.
David, if you weren't doing this cooking show thing,
Yeah.
could you leave that piece with the motor going so the paint doesn't settle on the bottom? Or
Yeah, I'll leave it for 10 minutes or so. That's about all it takes. All right, so the magic of the cooking show. We now have a finished black one here.
Your bottle there is interfering,
This one?
yeah, from a lot of people back there.
Oh,
Just with the camera.
There you go.
So this is the Joe Sonia translucent iridescent acrylic paint. It's quite a mouthful, it's up there. And where it's available, which is pretty widely, is up there also. They're not expensive, and they're a lot of fun. Well, anybody got a color preference? Blue. Blue? I don't want to do blue. Because I know I'm going to do the other one.
Oh, yeah, so what's our choices?
Red. Red's the right answer.
Ready to go.
There we go. So the stuff comes, little tubes like this. A little bit goes a long way. And it's interesting in that, as you'll see when I mix it, it just looks white, pearly white. You can't tell what color it is. So if you know you're going to use more than one color, it's a good idea to mark which is which, otherwise you might have a surprise. All right, so I'm going to put a modest amount in there. That's plenty. Like so. Then you need this stuff. This is its thinning agent. It's called flow medium. And how much you add matters also. I start out at roughly about equal to the amount of pigment I put in, the amount of dye I put in. Let's see what brush I'm going to use. And for this, I use fairly good watercolor brushes. These are not throwaways. To get some idea of the thickness you want, take some on the, and if it drops, falls off fairly readily, like that one, that's about right. That's about what you want. I've gone thinner than that, but generally not thicker. As you can see, it's just white. Now, in terms of brush strokes, first of all, this dries slowly, so I don't have to worry, oh my God, I put my brush on it and then I'm stuck, right? I'm just going to start, and I'm going to twirl the brush.
Which colors do you start with, the darker one or the lighter one? Do multiple colors?
The general rule of thumb is start darker, but it's at best a general rule of thumb. It depends on whether you're going to cover the entire piece with both colors. You may or may not be.
How long before that turns red?
10 minutes or so, 15, depending on how thick I leave it. When you see these areas that are whitish, opaque, that's thicker. I don't necessarily dislike those. I like the pattern that it creates. But I'm going back where I see there's white, for example, pick some up and move it elsewhere.
So that's about 50% overlap, so?
That's, that's very funny.
It is what it is.
This is why you make sample patterns, right? And in fact, some of you are about to learn that. So it's going to take me just another couple of minutes. Now you see these little voids in here? That's surface tension. So the water is sort of pulling back, but I like that. If you look at some of those pieces, you'll see that on there. The more you thin it, the more of that you get. And so it gives you this spider webby kind of look, and it's, you know, whatever you like. If you've done something, like right there, you don't like it, just go back and hit it again. As you can see, a little of this goes a long way.
But you'd want to mix a little more than you think you're going to use, just so you're not remixing.
Doesn't really matter, Michael. This, I mean, if you're never going to get exactly the same proportion. I'm not weighing this, I just eyeball. And so,
So Dave, this rice bowl that you have down here on the table in front, the blue one, is that the surface tension effect on that?
pick it up so I can see which one you're talking about. Yeah, but there's another darker reddish one, very thin, to your left, that shows it more.
Oh, this one here.
No,
The middle one.
Red?
The thin base is.
the thin,
That's,
No.
that thin black bowl,
oh, okay.
that shows it.
Ah, okay, there is a hint of red, yeah.
Now, I did drop that and break it, but don't hold that against the color. I like it, so I didn't throw it out.
You teach this in the classes that you do for turning?
Excuse me?
Yeah, school, high schools that you do the classes for turning, you do this for them too?
I have done it with one kid. Last year, I was actually doing epoxy inlay, platters. And this one poor kid, he was 80% finished. And he was walking across the shop floor, and he dropped the piece. Fell, hit the concrete, and shattered. And the kid was like, you know, what do I do? And he started, I could see him like pick up a piece, and it's like, and I just went over, I said, get the dustpan, sweep it up, put it in the garbage, go get a new blank, we're gonna do something. And so instead of repeating the epoxy, which we didn't really have time for him to do, he made one of these, and he loved it, and it came out very nicely. So that was how we recovered from the, and I was very happy I wasn't the one who dropped it. All right.
Usually bring the pattern all the way to the rim or
Yeah.
gaps or?
No, I mean, look, it's whatever you want to do, Joel. If you think there's any rules about this stuff, you are sadly mistaken. Maybe that's why I like, you know, I'm a lawyer. I lead, you know, or have led a fairly rule-bound life. This is as far from that as you can get. Now, while we wait a few minutes, now I can push this a little bit. I've got you know, heat gun here. I'm reluctant to do that. It's dangerous, and it's dangerous in the sense of before it really sets more, it tends to blow the paint around, and you know, it's so I'm trying to avoid forcing it that way. So with that in mind, I would like 3 volunteers who are willing to come up and play. Come on, give me 3. Okay, there's one. Come on. Got another one? Got 3. Oh, no, you got beaten out. Come forward. No, in front of the table. So, do your very own test strip.
Okay.
There's this Sharpie. You can write your name on the back. Now, we already have some red. Actually, let's put down some wax paper underneath on that surface. Let's cover this. Here's your working surface. Is that enough, or you need more?
No, that's good. I think we can manage.
Right? Now, we have red. Somebody want to play with red as a color?
Sure.
Okay, here's red and a brush. Your other colors, violet, blue, green, gold.
Gold.
Gold. All right. Let's find some gold. And green?
Green, please.
Green. You got. And gold. Ah, good choice. Let's mark what these are.
Okay.
Now, who had the gold? You have the gold.
Yeah, I got the green.
All right, so I'm going to get you started. Yeah, too much.
Okay.
But as they say with toothpaste, it won't go back in the tube, right? All right, so here's your green. They are iridescent. That's one reason they're very special. Yeah, you're good. Oh, oh. There we go, there we go. All right. Now, we'll hit you with some of this. We'll start you there. Give you a brush. And I want to give one of you a different brush, different kind of brush, because I want to demonstrate a different brush stroke. Okay, you can have that one.
Thank you.
Now use the back end to stir it.
Just around, okay.
Who would you clean your brushes with? Lacquer?
Hmm?
Lacquer to clean your brush?
This is all water,
What?
water-based.
Why is it always white before they turn color? What is it this like?
You'll find out.
Chemistry.
Yeah, it must be, but it's just interesting.
Okay, here's that for you.
This does not want to know.
You about ready? Lend me that for a minute. So what I suggest, your rag. I'm just going to take this for a minute, and on yours, I'm going to demonstrate a different brush stroke
Okay.
than that one, which you may or may not want to try. With one of these flat-ended brushes, and that is like this. I'm not smearing it, You see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And if you like, you know, you could do half this length one way and, yep, do whatever you like.
I think that this green makes that well. It's being very comfy.
So let's see.
Yeah, I've been stirring and stirring.
I think that's beyond its sell date, but you know what? It's gonna work.
Okay,
Anyway,
we're gonna make it
what's the
work.
worst that's
I'm
happened?
going to make the assumption that the platter was done with thicker paint and the rice bowl was done with thinner paint. Is that true?
Which two are you talking about?
This one and this one. So this looks like maybe it's thinner?
Oh, I think they're different paints, or different combinations.
Okay.
There's a turquoise blue as well as a blue.
Okay.
And a green. And I think the platter is more of the turquoise plus green.
Mixed together or
No.
overlapped?
Overlapped.
Yeah.
David,
And this-
David, did you hand tool the platter? Did you carve it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, not with hand, I carved it with, you know, high speed.
Right.
There.
I think he was asking if if you put a thicker paint on one than the other one.
This one looks almost opaque on the platter, and that one looks very, very thin.
That also has texture in it.
Well,
Maybe I'm saying it wrong. I don't know.
no,
No, that makes sense.
I honestly
more opaque.
don't remember much about the process, about doing that particular piece. All right.
So I have a question. So you see it sort of separating and pulling up
He could
there. Is
have
Yeah,
that
put
normal?
pearl essence in it,
Well, it's not only normal, I like it.
which would
Okay.
give it a sheen.
Just curious.
That's the surface tension thing I told you.
That's
the surface.
Yeah.
All right, now, to improve,
Different.
But you normally don't use the heat gun.
put yours,
Yeah.
back off, Leonardo.
But normally you would use the heat gun.
Normally, I do not use these, I let it air dry. But these, yeah. All right, so now the next step is,
The question is how we did it.
no. So the next step, I'm gonna suggest you switch colors,
Which color?
whichever, you got three.
Right.
Whatever you want for a second color, and apply some on half of your sample,
Okay.
all right?
Well, maybe we should just rotate.
Look, there's no,
Wait, why not need it? Doesn't it need to be drier though?
no, what's the worst that's gonna happen?
Yes, all right.
You'll get some interesting pattern that 5 years from now, somebody will say, how did you do that? I have no idea. Meanwhile, I'll see if I can speed this up a little.
Hey Dave,
Just remember the basic rule, less is more. Right?
Thank you.
Dave, have you tried mixing the colors?
I've tried it once or twice, it ends up sort of muddy looking, Bob, so I didn't do much with it, but when I did, I didn't like it. So I mix them by just put one on top of it.
I meant to get a different shade.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you
I'm trying to
can.
get over.
Um,
I forgot the message.
Are we supposed to switch
I think I let it.
All right, how are you doing over there?
Good.
You're done.
Got a perfection.
All right. Let's
Pretty
put,
thick right there, but what's it?
we've got a Jackson Pollock.
Yeah, very nice. I know. Then we should just be. Is this the green? The green?
All right, so you know what you need to do now,
That looks like a
if you haven't done it yet, take the marker and mark the back of the piece with your so you know what your second color was.
What was first, what was?
Well, I don't care which was which, but you know at least which the colors were. So why don't you do that?
This one was
red. It looks purple at the moment. Green and gold. You can't see the color right here, but in this. Right? You don't see the color.
All right, we're gonna let those dry. Well, that wasn't helpful. I put the wrong piece in. It's pretty dry. Can you all see the pattern on there?
Sure.
All right, who had the gold last? I want to know which brush was gold. This one?
Oh, no, that's. This is gold.
This, well, no, but the brush.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
Red brush, gold paint.
You said to play loose.
I did. I think this was green, actually. This is green.
The brush. The green brush was the extra thick one. The thickest one, I think. It was.
Okay, and who had the gold brush? You think it's this?
That's the red brush. That's the red brush.
Just getting answers to questions you didn't ask.
This is green, this is gold. This is the gold brush.
Yeah, that's the gold brush.
That's gold.
Who would like to go wash this off? Thank you, Jane.
Just to make sure.
Red is the base. And you remember what this would look like to start, right? We're talking kind of ugly poplar. And that's, as I say, one of the things that I have enjoyed about this is you get to take stuff that you ordinarily, thank you, sir. Let's see if there's any gold left. Oh, yeah, I got it.
That's gold.
That's gold. We can mix up some gold. AU on the gold. A chemist. You're busted. How many people know that's the symbol for gold?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, more than I thought.
Periodic chart.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Price is up on gold.
I'm not sure. Anybody surprised by that? All right. I think I would like this gold really thin, a little thinner than this.
A friend of mine bought a gold bar, 1 kilo, about 20 years ago. I bet you, at that time, it was a lot of money, but now it's.
David, I know you talked about protecting your jaws with electrical tape or whatnot, but why not finish the whole piece? I hollow out the other side, sand both sides, and then do the process. I know it's nice to hold it on the lathe to go slowly for the drying on the
Well, because
plastic.
Michael, doing this allows me access to the entire bottle. If I hollowed it out, I no longer would have that. Unless you put it on an expanding chuck somehow.
Right.
So that's my,
It's tricky. I always have problems at the rim.
problems with what, then, Joe?
At the rim where, you know, when I turn the bowl, you screw up the rim or something, or screw up the paint job.
All right.
Yeah, right.
You pretty much do this sitting down all the time, or do you standing up?
Well, because I have a lousy back, I tend to do it sitting down.
Okay.
Because it's easier on me. I can tell already I want this thinner. So you get to play. As you can see, there are no real rules here. I mean, the closest thing to a rule I've given you is don't even think about applying any kind of surface coating unless your wood is finished to the point that, you know, you would put a clear varnish on it. It's got to be defect-free, no scratch marks, no nothing. So if you don't have that, don't even think about it.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Is the JoJo just acrylic paint, essentially just a brand of acrylic paint?
Joe Sonia, it's a brand, it is acrylic, but it's translucent. So that most acrylic paints are not. They're opaque or semi-opaque. And these are also iridescent, so they have very special pigments in them. And I think you're going to see that when we get to the point where I put a little spray lacquer on here. And that's when it really pops. So if you think you can replace this with a regular acrylic, the answer is no. You can find acrylics which are transparent and put them on a black base. And you know that although that particular black paint is excellent, covers very well. I've experimented with others as well. There's a square platter right there, which is red and black, where I was trying to replicate something like Japanese lacquer finish. It didn't quite achieve that, but, and part of that was red spray rather than black. So your opportunities for experimentation here are endless.
When you're done with this, do you put a surface coat on it?
When I'm done with it, I will put 10 coats of spray clear lacquer on. 10 light coats. And when that is fully cured, I give it a couple of days. I mean, each coat of spray lacquer dries in 15 minutes, but I think there's still some residual solvent in there, and so I give it 48 hours or something, and then I'll put it in, and instead of that Yorkshire grit, they make a finer one, Yorkshire called microfine. And that way, I will polish the outside after all the lacquer's on, clear, and get that very soft, smooth touch. You have to be careful when you do that not to run too high a speed or too much pressure on it, or you will dissolve what's already on there. And ask me how I know this. And you will end up cutting it all off, redoing the bowl, and starting all over. So you have to be controlled.
So when you use spray where do you acquire spray lacquer? I've had problems getting it out.
I've been buying it on Amazon. And the brand that I use, which is up on that board, I think is excellent. Mostly, I think, because the nozzle is very, very good on that one. I've used Craft Supplies, which is probably higher solids. So in other words, puts more film on, but the nozzle isn't quite as good as the depth.
Can you get that online now, into California?
Yeah, I bought some not long ago, just within the last couple of months.
You can't buy it in California.
You can't anymore? I thought you can buy it. I used to.
Now they're ready to get back. But they do sell what is called
I said.
Have you ever tried applying with an airbrush?
I have played with, not an airbrush, no. I'll tell you what I have played with is using my air compressor hose and just spreading it out, creating patterns with the air compressor hose. All right. I can see the surface tension start to work. If you can see it start to pull in like this, that is the difference in surface tension between the water base that I just put on here and that black that was on there. And we'll see how that comes out. All right, Joe Sonia. So one quick last step here. Let's see how. These are not quite dry enough yet. So I think we'll just let those sit a little while longer. I'm going to take this off. And we'll move to So here's the piece I sprayed before. And it's pretty good. You can see the cracks telegraphing through. But I think when you put something like this Joe Sonia paint on it, I don't think you'll see them anymore. I mean, they'll just disappear in the pattern. But you had something that, as far as I was concerned, was firewood. And, you know, you can make something out of this that's actually, you know, you wouldn't be ashamed to have out. Yes?
I love poplar.
You love poplar?
Yeah. And the green will turn brown. I have some sculptures that are brown.
Chacun à son goût. Right? So, let's move on to dye for the moment. I don't really need to, I'm not going to be spraying anymore. I do this at home too. I mean, this is where it came from. To protect the chuck as well as my leg. And use this stuff, this stretch stuff, and wrap it around your chuck and anything else. And then, as you can see, I just use wax paper and whatnot to protect it, protect the ways, keep it clean. So now, we're not going to need this decoration anymore. The other thing I use holding these is little magnets. Very handy to have to hold the wax paper on your lathe. All right, let's get rid of this and this. Artisan dye. This guy is ready to go. Just going to take a little dust off if it has any on. And by the way, for both the Joe Sonia material and the artisan dye, which I'm about to demonstrate, there are very good videos. For the artisan dye, Craft Supply website has a very good video on how to do this. I'd use slightly different techniques, but you know, it's, if you want to see this thing and be able to, you know, watch it, rewatch it or whatever, it's there. And the Joe Sonia, there are several videos on YouTube. If you just did a search on Joe Sonia, some of them were in German, I think you don't, but whatever. They really go through the technique. Now what I would like to do with this demo, these discs are test pieces, and they're maple. Of course, what we have is poplar, which some like.
No, not for dye. Never for dye.
Never for dyes. Okay. And actually, and here is a test board I made with that. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to run a test on the actual wood you're going to use. This is on maple, not poplar. So what I'm hoping for is something close to this, and it may not come out quite as well as I thought this would. I really like this one. In fact, you can pass this around if you want. And that was just really a test, just to see what the colors look like. So get rid of this. So we'll see how close we can come to this. Now this test piece is also maple, so I don't think we'll quite get there, but we'll see. I'm going to show you a different way of applying it. Very user-friendly. This is an Artist Natural sponge, and you can get this in any, I don't remember where I bought it, whether it was Amazon or Dick Blick, you know, any of the art supply places. And you just cut a small piece of this off, and that's how we're going to apply this stuff. Here's what the artisan dyes look like. When you buy them, these little bottles, they are very handy, that they're small, they're easy to apply stuff with. And here is blue, that's the first color we use. And actually for the blue, I'll use a towel, a small piece. Make a little pad. Always shake this first. Put your finger on the end. Don't do what I did the other day, which is one of these rolled off my workbench, unbeknownst to me, ended up on the floor, and I stepped on it, went squirting out both ends that way. It's a very interesting pattern.
Permanent too.
Oh yeah, this stuff, by the way, this will get into and on everything. So protect yourself and anything you're around with it, because
Use a cheap blade
it
with a
will
650
really get you.
low.
So this is the easiest way to do it on the lathe at slow speed. A little slower. And does anybody care if this gets dyed, this piece?
I would.
No, okay. So I'm going to pour this on here, pretty well saturated. And then,
I tend to be cheap, I use half.
I don't think you'll see the guy on the video doing this, but this is what I do.
Do you have a difference in the way the dye works on the end grain versus side grain?
Oh, yeah.
On the both?
Yeah, and it's really visible. But as far as I'm concerned, that's part of the charm. If you want something that looks exactly the same, don't use dye. Paint the thing black and put color on top of it. Because otherwise, anything like this is definitely going to be absorbed more in the end grain.
Painting it white versus black.
You could. You'd have to have a paint that, you know, gave you a really dead flat surface, and or that you sand that down, you know, and then reapply.
Did you use the Yorkshire grit on this one before? Did the dye?
I did. I did on this one. And you can see the parts where more has been absorbed, less has been absorbed. Now, do I care when I'm trying to match that piece that's going around? No, I don't think so. I might, like right here, where there's not quite as much. Add a little more. Okay, that's pretty well all absorbed in. And you can see the grain through there. So that's what, let's just say, this is night and day difference between dye and paint, where we're totally covering the substrate. And I think my other color was,
Green. Aqua green.
it's actually on one of these.
Aqua green.
Okay. Well, here goes nothing. Aqua green. Get rid of this. And actually, what I'm going to do ubiquitous wax paper. Gonna stir this up. Now this is how I made that disc that's going around. Whether this is going to work the same way, I don't know. So I'll take a little piece of this sponge and I'm going to wet it. Which I don't like this piece I've got.
Have you ever tried using a loofah?
I've tried stuff like that. Not a loofah specifically, but like that. And other stuff. I've also tried using stuff like this, mesh. So anybody who's played with watercolors or with acrylics, you know, this is all technique from there. So now I've got my sponge. I'm going to wet it with some alcohol. I'm going to put some of this dye on my wax paper. And I'm going to blot this. And the reason I added the alcohol is that it sort of made these colors blend together. And that seems to be happening here too, which is what I like. More. A little more dye, a little more alcohol. We're talking drops here. Then you can let it dry a little bit and decide what you want to do. I'm going to try something. This is a little dark for me, so I'm just going to put some alcohol on there, no more dye, and see if I can. There we go.
Is that an end grain section?
Yep.
Have you ever played with like shellac or a sanding sealer ahead of time?
Not for color. There we go. So that's greener now, maybe a little more right here. And the alcohol is causing it to blend together. Ooh. Like one more cut. Right there. The edge. Well, I'm going to call that done. You know, you play with it as you see fit, and you can add more color to it. You can take some away by hitting it with alcohol. It came out reasonably close to what it did on, would you hand me that long one? Yeah. So here's the difference between, actually it is fairly close. So here it is on a maple text.
Pretty close.
And it came out reasonably close. You can still see grain. It's still, if I were going to be picky here, and of course I am a little picky, I might put a little more color right there where it's light.
See, that's why I said you never dye poplar.
Someone who has tried it.
Oh, yeah, yes.
I guess. Well, for this demo, Merrill, you think I'm going to put a chunk of maple on there? Well, if the club gave it to me, I would, but I happen to have a plank of poplar. I don't remember where the hell I got it. It was about 3.5 inches thick that I was able to slice off and, you know, rough out some bowls. But I thought it was a good way to demonstrate that you can take a not particularly attractive piece of wood and let's see if I can do this without spilling crap all over the place. Let's dry this a little bit. This isn't as risky. Let me turn this off while I talk. It isn't as risky as doing this with the paint, because with the paint, what you risk is it blisters. The solvent that's still in there wants to come out, and then you got to scrape it off. You got to start over. but this is going into the woods, so the heat gun is a lot less risky.
David, this piece that's going around, did you put a spray lacquer over the top?
I couldn't hear you, sorry.
Did you put a spray lacquer, a clear lacquer over the top of this piece that's going around?
I haven't yet, I'm going to.
No, this one here. This piece.
Oh yeah, there's lacquer on top of that piece, for sure. That sample, that disc that's going around, oh yeah, for sure. So I shouldn't have peeled off my covering for the lathe. But I'll tell you what to do, I'll do it on the Lazy Susan, so at least I don't mess up the lathe.
So, Dave, question for you.
Yep.
You went through all that trouble to raise the grain with alcohol and sand and get the surface. You just throw a whole bunch more alcohol on it. Is that wax layer is what's saving you from raising the grain again?
I think the fact that it's been raised,
Okay, so there's just nothing left there to worry about.
right,
Because you're pretty generous with the amount of alcohol.
I was, and actually, you know, when you think about it, now that you mentioned that, I think what I will do. No, I'm not gonna put alcohol. I'm gonna take some of this excess off. Although the lacquer will seal that in, I think this is better. Okay, so now, let's do a little spray. Wow. You don't really know what you got until you put some lacquer on top. And you'll either be very happy or not. Forgive me while I take a drink.
Yeah, be careful what bottle you pick up before you start drinking.
Yep, there is that risk. But I do know it's denatured, so I'm not going there. So. Now, I used this just a day or so ago, so I won't spend as much time doing this as you should. And actually, I'd really rather do it on the lathe. So we're going back. So, all right, where'd I hide my wax tape? Ah, here it is.
Set it over there earlier.
Well, now I'm looking for magnets, but you know what? We'll do it with tape.
That's a little way. You said it on the board earlier.
Which board?
On the front of the, right by the robust sign on the board.
What by,
No, towards the headstock.
you set it over by where you drilled it.
You put it right forward, where you see the robust side on the end of the.
Yeah.
No, this side. You put it on the board of the ground.
This'll work.
Dave, why do you like lacquer versus another finish?
Because it's clear, it's absolutely clear, transparent, and it doesn't yellow. And I don't want yellowing on top of these colors. So that's why. So when you do this, you want to be 8-10 inches away, and you want to keep it at about that same angle as you do it. Now I'm going to let that go for a minute or two. Oh, actually, dry enough. While we're waiting for that, should have held it up before I did that, but look at how it made these pop. As I said, you don't really know what you have until you put some lacquer on. And who did the Jackson Pollock? Jamie, where are you? Were you the Jackson Pollock here?
Yeah.
Worship.
I don't know.
Worship.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to hit this again, even though it's not fully dry.
Lots of really light colors.
Yep. Take this off. Put this guy on. Let's try to dry this off a little bit more.
What color did you use for that again?
Say again?
What color did you use for that one again?
Red and gold.
The red's gone.
I'm gonna listen, this bowl here, how did you mask off?
Say that again?
How did you mask this one off? Or did you turn it off?
Turned it off.
Oh.
And that actually, hold that bowl up so other people can see it. That's actually a combination. I originally dyed that bowl, and that red that you see in the center is what's left of the dye. But I didn't like the way it looked, so after some long period of time, I picked it up and cut it back down, but that stain had penetrated. So I decided I liked what was left. The Rorschach test, and applied the Joe Sonia to the rim. So that's a combo.
So a question, Dave. You talk about the kind of the Japanese vase technique.
Speak up a bit.
The Japanese vase technique,
Yeah.
is that a black paint down and then you sand it and you put the dye over it?
No. In that one, I experimented with painting a part of the platter black and part of it red, and trying to feather it. So no, there was no sanding back. Well, we're going to call this dry enough for this demo. And take a look pre-lacquer. With some lacquer. So,
Is there red in there?
yeah, that's red and gold.
And after you've done your 10 coats, do you cut the lacquer back, or?
So I use that very fine
Oh, right.
grit. And as I said, I'm careful to run the lathe at reasonably slow speed when I do that, say 500-600 RPM, and not to, put too much pressure on it. You don't want to heat it up or you'll melt it.
And after a couple days.
And thank you, Michael. Yes, absolutely. Let it sit for 2 or 3 days before you try to do that, because you want any of the residual solvent to have evaporated out. This looks good enough. I'm going to put another coat on right now. And then we'll go back to the black one. All right, let's take this off. Let's go back to this one.
Really popped.
Yep. And it hasn't fully covered it yet. That's some of the end grain area I can see, but it will. And
When you're doing lacquer, do you have to take any extra precautions in terms of ventilation or masks? I've never used it.
so I have good ventilation in the shop. I have a door at one side, a window at this side. So both are open. And if I'm doing a lot of lacquer, I have a good floor fan blowing out. So I turned that on as an exhaust fan. And I can tell you that, I was a chemist before I was a lawyer, and I spent many years working in chemical manufacturing plants, with thousands of gallons of solvents, and so I kind of like it. Brings back old memories.
I've got an off-the-wall question, maybe I'm wrong, but I've used a lot of depth. I used to use it years ago, and I made other kind of furniture. I always thought that when you're using the gloss, it doesn't have the rattle in it. Because that one does. But there is something, one of those, you don't have the rattle in it, because there's only one ingredient, it doesn't have to be mixed.
Well, what happens is the resin tends to settle out. That's what you're mixing. So you got resin and solvent in there, and propellant.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but there is some stain or something out there, and I looked it up on YouTube or somewhere. In fact, if it doesn't rattle on it, then it's just one ingredient that doesn't need to be mixed. I thought it was that, but I'm fairly wrong.
Well, any other questions anybody has? So let me hold these up as samples. This is gold and red, and on cedar. So even though it's on cedar, you can see those colors really pop very nicely. Jamie's masterpiece here is some red with blotches of green, which I think is pretty stunning.
It's like a bacteria.
A bacteria. And then we have Pamela, green and gold with different kinds of brush strokes. And if you zoom in on this, if you can, I particularly like that sort of cobwebby look you get because of the surface tension difference. And if you like that, add more of that thinner, the Josonia thinner. That tends to get you to there. Any more? So this one, we'll call this done. It's got 2 coats of lacquer. And getting back to where we started, which is starting with a piece of wood that has no particular character that you like or color or whatever, you can do all kinds of stuff with it to make it interesting and maybe even something you'd not be ashamed to have around. And so that's what you see here. And I think basically I'm done unless anybody has any more questions. Yeah, back there?
Yeah, do you buff the lacquer out after it dries thoroughly?
Yeah, as I said, allow it to fully dry for 2 or 3 days. And then I use the microfine polish, or if you've got one you used on like plastic pen, the high gloss, very, very hard.
Wires has a really good.
Something like that. But keep the speed relatively low and don't hit it, don't press hard on it, because you don't want to heat it up. So yes is the answer to your question. Anything else? Yeah.
So you had mentioned, I don't know the gentleman over here, you put electrical tape around that ridge when you cut in the hollow it out.
Yeah. Yeah, the same black tape that I just used. This stuff. I'll put some on the jaws so that when I turn this around to hollow it, I try not to mar that mortise. And it pretty much works. I mean, depending on how aggressive you are. Anything else? Well, thank you all.
Thank you.